First, an observation, then a question. Thank you for mentioning the Gaza genocide, because I think when we have always been critical of authoritarianism in the Middle East, we always know the cost of authoritarianism. It's political repression, it's sort of corruption, it leads to, destroyed societies. We never imagined that one of the costs of the persistence of authoritarianism in the region would be greenlighting a genocide. And so now we see another, reason. If there was accountable governance in the region, then arguably this genocide would not be happening. So thank you for that observation. I want you to sort of just comment on, an important observation that matters for this conference, for this topic, and because we're in Washington D.C. and you've talked about an important point, and that's the relationship between U.S. support for authoritarianism in the Middle East and its blowback effect on bolstering authoritarianism here in the United States. Could you talk about the details of that connection, how you see it working out in ways that, have produced this moment that we're all trying to navigate?
Sure. I mean, it's a long topic, and I've written on this extensively, but I'll try to be brief in summarizing. What is very clear is that the cost of hypocrisy, the cost of the double standards of talking about human rights and democracy, but actively maintaining, supporting, and protecting dictatorships, is not just being called a hypocrite. It's the actual cost of eroding the very values of democracy and human rights. It is degrading any faith or belief that democracy and human rights have any value. And most significantly, it's the obliteration of the ability to seek democracy and human rights or international law anywhere else in the world. When Russia invaded Ukraine, there was no space for the United States to credibly argue that this was a gross violation of international law, that the acquisition of territory by force, that the indiscriminate attacks on civilians violate basic norms of international law, because at the very same time, the United States was brussing Israeli acquisition of territory by force, Israeli annexation of Palestinian territories, Israeli indiscriminate bombardment. And so the direct consequence of America's support for abusive regimes, whether it was Saudi Arabia in its 7-year-long bombardment campaign in Yemen, or Egypt in its sustained crimes against humanity, systematic and widespread torture, extrajudicial executions, is that it undermined America's ability to advocate for against those very crimes anywhere else in the world. And so it opened up the space for a global erosion. What I've always argued is that the United States' main advantage over China and its economic success, or Saudi Arabia and its economic success for that matter, is democratic rule, is freedom of speech. The reason why the United States remains a place where people want to come to, even if it may be more profitable in China, is because of the freedom here. And if we are giving that up, what do we have left? But in terms of undermining democracy and rights in our own country, it really has been Palestine that is the linchpin of the withering of democracy and freedom in the United States. And that is simply because our elected officials have chosen to prioritize their pro-Israel donors and the oligarchs and their demands over their own public, over the U.S. Constitution, over our freedom of speech and freedom to protest. And so that crackdown on speech in the United States, just like the anti-BDS laws that have been passed over the past decade, restricting the right of Americans to advocate for a boycott of Israel, has opened the door to further undermine freedom of speech, academic freedom, freedom of protest throughout the country, and in a way that it goes well beyond Israel and Palestine now.
Great. Okay, so we need an entire conference just on this topic. So maybe that's a theme for next year. But we have just under 10 minutes. We'll take 3 questions and then we'll do them together consecutively, and we'll get an answer from Sarah. 1, 2, and then 3. Go ahead. Here.
Thank you so much. I'm a teacher, so I'm loud, but thank you for the mic. Thank you so much, Sarah, for this excellent keynote. I really enjoyed it so much, and it really touched on so many important points. I wanted to ask a question to the previous panelists, didn't have a chance to, so I'm going to ask it to you. What would be some of the proactive and preventive measures which could be put in place in order to ensure that a new rising hope in a country like Syria, for example, does not turn into some kind of nightmare of, authoritarianism or, democratic reversal, the detours we have been witnessing and seeing in some of the so-called quote-unquote post-Arab Spring countries, whether in terms of fighting or preventing some of the internal threats like sectarian divide and divisions and all of that, or some of the external threats from counter-revolutionary forces like UAE and others in the region. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Salam, you're next.
Salan Anirati, Muslim Public Affairs Council. I just want to add my voice to commendation of your excellent, brilliant speech. And I agree it should be spread throughout and actually studied. My question is about national security because it's a conundrum. And while the U.S. has gone out and said we're here for democracy, Western powers have claimed that. They also say we're here for our national security. This is a matter of national security. That adds to more support for tyranny. That adds to the erosion of civil liberties here. So how do we address that here to help alleviate the problems over there?
Sunji, go ahead. Last question.
Thanks, Leah. With the ocean of oppression and is an ocean of hypocrisy, and with the ocean of hypocrisy is an ocean of opportunity. And so my question for you is, when you think about all of the interventions in the positive sense of activists and advocates that could be taken, that haven't yet been taken because of capacity, maybe if you have a moment to highlight what some of the suggestions might be that you have for others in this room or beyond that could take those up.
So you got 5 minutes.
All right, I'll try to be quick. Syria,
Stability.
national security, and activism. On Syria, I was just having a conversation with Whitson, I don't know where he is, that we have a work cut out for us, we in the pro-democracy community, to actually identify a strategy for what we can try to secure from the current Syrian government, for what kind of protections we can ask for, given the circumstances in which they're operating. And, I agree with all those who say that democracy and human rights will always take a backseat to economic survival, food in people's mouths. I think that the principal protection that we have to secure first and foremost is freedom of speech. Without freedom of speech, there is no space for civil society. Civil society is a fiction and window dressing if it can't speak fully and critically of what the government does and doesn't do. And part and parcel of that is freedom of association. If civil society is to act as a de facto check and balance and power of government, even if it doesn't have institutional power yet, it must be allowed to associate freely and without restriction by the government. Does that come with security risks? Of course it does. But I believe that the risks of not allowing civil society to speak freely and associate fully are far, far greater to the survival of the Syrian people and the Syrian state. This would take much longer answer, the much longer list. On national security, I think that we have long operated under a lie that has been fed to us for many generations, based not on facts, based not on actual systematic analysis, but based on an ideology, a belief that's no less different than a religious belief, that that the United States must be the hegemon. It must be the superpower of the world, and if it's not, that's bad. I think that approach, particularly to the Middle East, but in many other parts of the world, has seriously harmed the United States, wasting our resources, wasting our population by creating, generating, and supporting wars and conflicts throughout the world, but in particular in the Middle East. And I don't believe that America's interests lie in acting like a third-rate, late-stage imperial power, where the only thing we really have to offer the Middle East are mercenary American forces for protection. I don't think that is a way for us to progress and advance the interests of the American people, much less our role and responsibility as members of this planet, as citizens of this planet. I know that the claims for U.S. interests are presented as fact, that the U.S. national security interest demands that the United States have more military bases in all of the Middle East than all of the rest of the world's countries combined. That needs to be challenged and scrutinized, and I think an actual assessment of the facts would show that it's been harmful. I don't believe that ensuring continued access to full and cheap oil unrestricted is a benefit to what should be a transition to clean energy and clean fuel, not just in our country, but around the world. And the notion that protecting apartheid Israel has anything to do with the national security interest, is just a laughable claim that, any cursory review of the facts would review. And that is one thing that it seems the Trump administration, or some in the Trump administration, appear to understand. For activists and activism, what I have been advocating, particularly in the 5 years that I've been at Dawn and left Human Rights Watch, and I'm so happy to see my Human Rights Watch colleague, Ricky Goldstein, here, is that for the major human rights organizations, we can no longer opt out of the political space. That merely believing that we can report and document and name and shame and expose abuses and then advocate with some benevolent government to do the right thing, that motto has failed. Look at the record of the past 30 years of human rights research and documentation and show me where things are better. It's not working. I do believe, though, that we have to address the sources of corruption in our own government that make it a not fair fight. We should be able to persuade our legislators that dropping bombs on our country is a bad thing, that supporting genocidal states are a bad thing, but it's not an equal fight because we're not actually having a battle of ideas. What we need to do is to rule out the corruption in our government. That means that these people are making decisions not in the interests of the American people, but in their own economic fortunes and advances. If we don't fight as activists to root the corruption out of our own government, the rest of the human rights enterprise and our human rights advocacy really doesn't stand a chance.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Please join me in thanking Sarah Lee Whitson. And Sarah, please publish that talk. It really needs to get disseminated. I think we are roughly on time, so we're going to take a brief break and transition to the next panel.